My brother-in-law stole my plate at a birthday meal and sneered, "You shouldn't eat this. You're not truly part of the family." As I pushed back my chair, the table laughed. Good fortune I carried my own feast. I dropped a folder I brought out on the table. His jaw stopped when he opened it. I wed into an expansive, noisy Irish-American family. I thought at first they liked me. I made an effort, was courteous, laughed at their jokes, including the less hilarious ones. Still, gradually things began to shift. I do not have Irish background. I don't look like them. Their last name is not mine. And to some of them, it meant I truly didn't belong. It started tiny, jokes about my culture, observations about actual Americans from the side. Someone might question, what even is it if I were cooking for a family gathering? Should I enter a discussion, they would veer the subject to something I would not know about. Old recollections from early life, inside jokes, things I cannot possibly have. Most of them were only apathetic, not really hostile. However, Philip, my brother-in-law, he had everything planned for me. Philip was the type of man who felt he was better than everyone else. Having a construction company, he boasted about his knowledge of system operation. Constantly hunting for a loophole, constantly generating money in ways that didn't seem quite legal, he always had some type of scheme running underfoot. He also had a tendency of passing tiny remarks on my lack of true relatives, sometimes subtle, sometimes not. He would tell me personally, "You are fortunate we allowed you in." My wife Sophia would advise me to brush him off. She would answer, "That is just how he is. He is not meant to signify." Nevertheless, I knew better. The family had a big meal at a fancy restaurant in Boston for Sophia's dad's turning 65. Though I knew the evening would be long, I was ready to get through it. Eat my meal, strike brief chat, go home. Simple. Dinner went going well at first. Sitting next to Sophia, I listened to everyone argue over one another. The waiter arrived, we ordered. I closed my lips. The dish came smelling fantastic and was boiling hot. And then Philip rushed over and snatched my plate exactly as I grabbed my fork. I came to stop. Like nothing had occurred. Everyone resumed chatting, laughing, drinking. Philip grinned and held my dish just out of grasp. "You shouldn't eat this," he cautioned. "You hardly actually belong in the family." And the table laughed as well. Not a hesitant chuckle. Not a stifling chuckle. A sincere, true chuckle. Including even Sophia. That was the instant my own change occurred. I peered around. Nobody would have stood up for me. Nobody was going to argue it was improper. Not the wife of mine. Not that of her parents. Not one of her siblings either. I exhaled deeply. Though my hands remained still, my heart was racing. I grinned and threw back my seat. Good fortune I carried my own feast. I then dug from my bag a thick manila folder. I dumped it in front of Philip. The space became quiet. Again, Philip laughed, but it sounded forced. "Your will is what this is?" I started to grin more broadly. "Open it." He did, but rolling his eyes. The second he viewed the first page, his expression altered. His eyes flicked back and forth, scanning the text, rapidly turning the pages. His smirk vanished. Blood flowed from his face. "What the devil is this?" he said. Sophia leaned forward to examine. Like his wife, then. His parents. His brothers here. Everyone. Philip shook his hands. "From where did you find this?" Leaving my elbows on the table, I leaned forward. "I have buddies. Actually, I had a private investigator. I had also spent the last 6 months researching Philip's background. Because Philip was not just a moron. He behaved illegally. Philip's building firm contracted for government projects. Contracts signed by minority-owned companies. Philip was not among the minority. But his firm was established under a bogus Native American name, a loophole that permitted him qualify for work allocated for legitimate minority-owned enterprises. I had the evidence. Fake tribal papers. Emails where he explicitly acknowledged to lying, bank data indicating millions in fraud, and then the last page, a signed, sealed formal complaint, filed with the Massachusetts Attorney General's office. Philip let out a choked groan. His fists grasped the table so tightly his knuckles turned white. His wife took the newspaper and began reading. Her hands trembled. His mother gasped. His father's cheeks grew crimson. No one was laughing anymore. Philip sprang up so quickly his chair almost overturned. You think you can do this to me? His voice was trembling now. You think you can come into my household and do this shit? This, I said, touching the folder. This is your doing. I just discovered it. He surged forward like he was going to get it back, but his wife pushed him away. You lied to me, she hissed. You assured me this was legal. He ignored her, going back to me. I swear to God, sit down. Philip, I replied, voice calm. Enjoy your food. You paid for it with stolen money after all. Sophia eventually snapped out of it. Wait, can we just speak about this? This is family, I turned to her. Oh, now it's family, she flinched. Philip went to his dad, his final chance. Dad, you know how these things operate. His father got up, tossed his napkin on the table, and went out. Philip's mother followed. His wife was weeping now, gripping the papers like they were a death sentence. And finally, the cherry on top. The restaurant manager went over, clearing his throat. Sir, he continued, gesturing at Philip, your card was refused. I sat back in my chair, picked up my drink, and took a leisurely sip. Philip stood there, motionless, gazing at everyone staring at him. His world was coming apart in real time. And this was only the beginning. Philip's expression was pure wrath. His mouth expanded and closed like a fish panting for oxygen. His credit card sat worthless on the table. His family was either staring at him or too astonished to comment. But I wasn't done yet. The waiter cleared his throat again, seeming embarrassed. Sir, do you have another mode of payment? Philip's wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, presumably, dried her tears and turned to him. Jesus, Philip, can you just pay the dang bill? Philip touched his pockets like a guy attempting to discover an escape route. Then he grabbed for his phone. I spoke before he could even open it. I wouldn't bother checking your accounts. His head snapped up. What the heck does it mean? I leaned back, crossed my arms. Let's just say you should have chosen a better accountant. Remember how I stated I had been delving into Philip's life for 6 months? Well, I wasn't only checking into his scam. I was looking at his money. Philip maintained multiple accounts under various names, perhaps to protect his wife from realizing how much income he siphoned from his own firm. But here's the issue with concealing money in shady areas. If you don't do it well, it's really simple to tamper with. Let's just say, with a few anonymous tips, the IRS had frozen his assets. Sophia turned to me, eyes wild. You did what? I shrugged. He was doing tax fraud. I merely guided the appropriate individuals in the right way. Philip's hands were trembling now. He opened his phone nevertheless, opening up his banking app. The second he observed his balance, his face became gray. Holy crap, someone whispered. Philip went to his father. Dad, you have to… His father interrupted him off with a raised hand. Don't! His voice was chilly, final. Philip's mother cleaned her hands on her napkin like she had touched something nasty. You utilized phony paperwork to take from those who legitimately required such contracts? Philip sneered. Oh, come on. You think I'm the only one who does it? The system is rigged. I was simply playing the game. His father shook his head. No, Philip, you were cheating, and now you were caught. Philip's wife stared down at the papers in front of her, eyes searching page after page. You told me you developed this firm from the ground up. Her voice cracked. You told me you worked for all we had. Philip swallowed hard. I did. She thrust the folder into his chest. You lied to me, to all of us. Philip's younger brother, who had remained quiet this entire time, sneered. Jesus, Guy, you always behaved like you were superior than everyone. Turns out, you're simply a damn thief. Philip opened his lips, closed it. No one was defending him. Not one person. And then came the ultimate twist I hadn't prepared for. Philip's wife wiped her tears, took a big breath, and then looked to me. How long have you known? I blinked. About the fraud? 6 months. No, she responded, her voice steady now. About her. The table fell utterly quiet. Philip's head snapped toward her. What? She brought out her own folder from her handbag. Thick, exactly like mine. She tossed it on the table. Philip didn't touch it. His wife put forth a weak chuckle. Oh, you thought I wouldn't find out. You believed you were the only one who could play this game. She turned to me, nodding. Thanks for putting this up. It made things simpler for me. I had no clue what she was talking about until I glanced down at the folder. On top was a printed screenshot, a message exchange, Philip's name, a woman's name, and a photo, a very extremely compromising photo. Philip's face drained of all color. Holy crap, his younger brother whispered. His mother gasped, covering her lips. Philip's wife let out a sigh. Yeah, thought so. She picked up her wine glass and took a drink, her hands steadier now. She's 23, by the way. She resorted to Philip's father, one of his interns. His father banged his fist on the table. You nasty little crap. Philip opened his mouth. His wife stood. We're done. She stared at me. Oh, and just so you know, my lawyer's going to enjoy all this. Then she turned and went out. For the first time that night, Philip was utterly dumbfounded. And it was the moment I knew something. I had come here to uncover one of Philip's greatest falsehoods. But it turns out he had even more skeletons than I realized. And now they were all pouring out, one after the other. And Philip? He had nowhere left to flee. Philip sat frozen, his world disintegrating around him. His wife had just walked out, leaving behind a bombshell that even I hadn't seen coming. The family sat in startled silence, the weight of the occasion weighing down on the table, and so Philip did what all cowards do when they have nowhere else to turn. He stared at me. This is your fault. His voice was low, yet there was a harsh edge to it, like a weapon that had just been unsheathed. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, really? He sprang up from his seat, palms locked into fists. You set me up. You turned everyone against me. You think you're so very clever, don't you? I didn't move. I didn't blink. I didn't turn anybody against you, Philip. I leaned forward, keeping my voice cool. You accomplished it all by yourself. Philip's jaw stiffened. His hands trembled at his sides like he was pondering doing something crazy. And then, his mother said, sit down. Philip flinched. He turned to her, eyes begging. Mom, her lips were squeezed into a tiny line. You lied to us. You humiliated this family. And now you want to blame someone else? Sit down. For a second, I thought he was going to disregard her. But suddenly, he slumped back into his chair like a chastised kid. Philip sat there, breathing deeply, his hands still trembling. But something about his response didn't set well with me. Something wasn't adding up. The fraud, that made sense. The cheating, not surprising. But the way he responded to his credit cards being declined, that wasn't simply panic. That was absolute horror. And then it struck me. Philip, I said slowly, how much do you owe? His head jerked toward me. What? I cocked my head. Your accounts are blocked, yet you behaved like you anticipated there to be money. You didn't know about the freeze. I halted. So what were you intending to pay with? He didn't answer, but I wasn't asking for his sake. I was asking for his family's. Philip's younger brother, the quiet one, sat up a bit straighter. Wait, what do you mean, oh? Philip's lips pinched into a narrow line. I let the stillness linger for a time. Then I grabbed one more document from my bag. I hadn't intended on utilizing it. But now it was required. I shared it across the table. Philip's father grabbed it first. He began reading. Then his fists gripped around the page. Jesus Christ! His mother grabbed over, taking it from his fingers. Her eyes flew over the page, and suddenly she gasped. Philip's younger brother leaned in. What? What is it? His mother raised her head, her face pallid. He took out debts. Big ones. The table tightened. Philip's father wiped a palm over his face. How much? His mother's hands trembled. She fought to get the words out. Almost 3 million. A startled stillness descended over the table. Then Philip's father threw his fist against the table so hard the cutlery shook. Where the heck is the money, Philip? Philip's face had gone entirely pale now. He looked like a guy on the edge of breaking. I already knew the answer, and I had a sense his family did too. I studied Philip intently, waiting. And then he did something really dumb. He looked at the door. It was quick. Barely a glimmer of movement, but I caught it, and I wasn't the only one. Philip's younger sibling turned, following his gaze. Then his eyes narrowed. "Who's outside, Philip?" Philip's head jerked back. No one. Too quick, too defensive. His younger brother threw back his chair and arose. "I'm going check. Don't." Philip's voice cracked, too late. His younger sibling was already moving. I stood too, following close after. The second we approached the entryway of the restaurant, I felt it. That change in the air. That creeping sense of being watched. And then I spotted the automobile, a sleek black SUV, parked illegally, engine operating, and inside, a man, wearing sunglasses, at night. I breathed slowly. "Jesus, Philip, who the heck did you borrow money from?" Philip's brother turned to him, eyes burning. "You took out loans from the type of folks that send men in SUVs to remind you to pay?" Philip didn't respond. Because he didn't have to. His silence spoke everything. I peered toward the restaurant entrance, pondering my next step. Because suddenly, this wasn't simply about vengeance anymore. This was about getting the heck out alive. The dark SUV waited outside the restaurant like a predator ready to attack. The guy inside, sunglasses, rigid stance, hard glare, didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. Philip's younger brother turned back to him, fists clenched. "Who was that?" Philip's lips opened, but no sound came out. I moved closer. "Philip, you need to start talking. Now." His jaw clenched, his gaze jumping from me to the door, to the table full of people still inside. I could see the calculations moving through his mind. Lie? Negotiate it? Speak honestly. He picked incorrect, simply. Some males I know mumbled, voice hardly audible above a whisper. His father arrived at the doorway. "Some males?" He grabbed Philip by the collar, his voice low and menacing. "Those aren't some dudes, you moron. That's a debt collector." Silence. Then Philip's mother gasped. She wasn't gazing at the SUV anymore. She was staring at me. "You knew," she muttered, her face contorted in terror. "You knew about all of this." I swallowed, not all of it, but enough. Enough to know Philip was in deep. Enough to realize this wasn't simply commercial fraud anymore. The truth comes crashing down. Philip's wife, well, ex-wife at this time, strolled back in at precisely the perfect moment, her arms crossed, mascara smudged, face dead calm. "You didn't simply cheat on me," she remarked coldly. "You squandered our future away." Philip's entire body locked up. "No, yes you did," she yelled, and the whole diner turned to watch. Eyes darting between us like a live courtroom play, the manager, the waiters, random patrons froze. Philip breaths out. "You lie." "It is not gambling." She knocked down my folder off the table. "I just ended my call with my attorney." "You borrowed money personally under my name. You invented my signature." One more gasp from his mother. His father seemed poised for murder. Philip's lips moved sloppily as if his brain was shutting down. That's not." He turned around as if expecting someone, anybody, to help him. Still, no one else remained. Not his spouse, not from his parents. None even Sophia, not especially me. "Philip," I replied, keeping my voice under control. $3 million is gone. How much of that?" He replied nothing. Still, his stillness was just enough. Grabbing his chair, his father flung it across the diner. It knocked down cutlery and drinks as it smashed onto a table. "You spat and destroyed us. You fuck shame." Now Philip's mother was weeping, her mouth covered by both hands. Still shell-shocked, my wife Sophia stood next to me. She turned, her words barely audible. "How, in fact, did you receive the money?" I sigh. I would risk everything Philip used his firm as collateral. "Extra quiet." Philip's wife laughed sarcastically. "What then results from non-repayment of these debts?" I had no need to justify, knowing all of this. These were not the type of folks who let things go without thinking. Philip's father drew a slow, long breath. "You have to go outdoors," he replied, his voice shockingly calm. "Converse with them, computed." Philip gave a strong headshake. "Not number. I cannot. No, no, no." I stated plainly. "You should have considered that before you pilfered funds from criminals." Philip spun around me. Your haughty little—" He then jumped. I saw the last straw approaching. I moved back just as Philip struck at me. Before two waiters snatched him from behind, he barely touched my chin. The eatery descended into anarchy. Someone yelled. The manager cried out for security. Cluttered to the floor were dishes. Philip's eyes wild and frantic, he battled the guys clutching him. "You are responsible for this," he yelled. "You brought devastation into my life." I looked at him, wiping my chin. "Philip, you wrecked your own life." The restaurant doors swung wide at that. One guy from the SUV entered, off with sunglasses, cold eyes. None of expression. The room became deathly quiet. Philip's body clamped down all around. The guy held back on speaking. He did not set a scene. He merely took out a little envelope and laid it on the table. One last warning. "Time is running out," he stated just now. He turned then and headed back outside. Philip sounded as if he was strangling. Without glancing at him, his father said, "Change this." Philip drew a slow, unsteady breath. He left without another word then. We witnessed him mount the SUV via the glass doors. They then turned aside and left. Nobody talked for a long period. Philip's father then settled back and grabbed his whiskey glass. "Still," he murmured, "that turned out to be a birthday dinner nightmare." Tears sprang out in his wife. His younger kid just shook his head. Philip's ex-wife took out her phone and began texting, most likely her divorce attorney, including Sophia. Sophia turned to me, her face incomprehensible. "You intended this." I looked back at her. I confessed I meant to expose him. Not included in my plans was everything. She ate. "You knew, however." "True." In silence. She then released a breath, staring down her hands. "I'm not sure whether I should be thanking you or furious with you." I laughed momentarily, brief and devoid of humor. Participate in the club. Dinner was a silent catastrophe the rest of it. Philip's father paid the debt silently. His mother paned into a napkin. Trying to seem as if nothing had occurred, the waiters gathered shattered glass. First to leave Philip's wife was beside his parents. Sitting in the empty restaurant, Sophia and I stared at the carnage. At last, she spoke. "What, then, goes on?" I leaned back and gave some thought. "Yes," I said. "Philip's firm is finished. He is under accusations of fraud. His accounts stop. And now he owes money to the type of individuals that reject no as an answer." Sophia shut her eyes. "John." I let out a slow breath. "But I believe that for every one of us." Her eyes shook. "What do you mean?" I locked eyes with her. "You sighed, Sophia." "Upon grabbing my plate, you shared laughs with them." She stiffened. I shook my head. "I understand. You knew him as your brother. It may be difficult. But are you on my side? I really need to know. Or theirs?" She did not reply straight away, and it supplied all the information. I grumbled, rose, and tossed some cash over the table. Without further word, I left then. Philip? Nobody quite knows what happened to him. He vanished for a little while, emerged many months later, broken, divorced, and a shadow of the man he once was. His folks stopped talking to him. His ex-wife consumed everything. For Sophia and me? Let me confess, however, I never ate supper with her family once again. And I never ever let someone grab my plate ever again.